We built our world on a foundation of cheap coffee and an unshakable, naive belief that we were smarter than everyone else. Our first office was his parents' garage, a cramped space that smelled of gasoline and old lawn clippings. The server rack sat next to a rusty lawnmower, and our whiteboards were propped up on stacks of National Geographic magazines. He was the visionary, the one who could walk into a room and sell the dream with a passion that was as infectious as it was genuine. I was the builder, the one who would translate his grand ideas into clean, elegant code working late into the night, fueled by lukewarm pizza and the quiet hum of the machines. We were more than partners, we were brothers in every way that mattered. We'd known each other since we were kids, our friendship forged in scraped knees, shared secrets, and a mutual understanding that the world was a puzzle we were meant to solve together. The startup was the ultimate puzzle. It was an idea we'd scribbled on a napkin in a late-night diner, an idea so audacious, so beautifully simple that we knew it would change everything. We poured our lives into it. I cashed out the small inheritance my grandmother had left me, and he drained his savings account. Every dollar went into the company. Our budget wasn't just tight, it was suffocating, but we didn't care. We were young and fueled by the intoxicating belief that sacrifice was a temporary state, a necessary investment in a future that was already written in the stars. My girlfriend at the time was the third pillar of our small world. She was our first believer. She'd bring us food when we forgot to eat, listen to our rants about buggy code and impossible deadlines, and she'd look at us with a faith that made us feel invincible. She was part of the foundation, her support a critical component of the entire structure. I remember the three of us sitting on the oil-stained floor of that garage, sharing a single beer because it was all we could afford, mapping out a future where we would look back at these days and laugh. The lines between our lives blurred until they disappeared completely. His family was my family. My apartment was our second office. We shared clothes, debts, and dreams. There was no formal risk management because the very idea of mistrusting him was unthinkable. Our handshake was more binding than any legal document a team of lawyers could draft. Years passed in a blur of keystrokes and caffeine. We missed birthdays, weddings, and funerals. Our world shrank to the size of a computer screen. We had small victories along the way, a piece of press in a tech blog, a handful of enthusiastic early users, and each one felt like a monumental triumph. We were running on fumes, our personal finances in tatters, but the dream was getting closer, more tangible. We could almost taste it. Then came the breakthrough. A major update to our software, the one we'd been working on for 18 solid months, went viral. It was like watching a slow-motion explosion. The user numbers ticked upwards, then surged, then went parabolic. Our servers, housed in that dusty garage, groaned under the strain. My phone and his started ringing at the same time and never stopped. It was the media, it was competitors, and most importantly, it was the investors. The men in expensive suits who had never given us the time of day were now knocking down our door. I'll never forget the night we knew we'd made it. We were sitting on the roof of my apartment building, looking out over the city lights, the same city that had ignored us for so long. We had just received our first term sheet, an offer from a top-tier venture capital firm for an amount of money that seemed like a typo. The number had so many zeros it looked like a joke. He opened a bottle of champagne, a real one, not the cheap, sparkling wine we usually drank. The cork shot out into the night sky, a tiny punctuation mark on the end of our long years of struggle. He threw his arm around my shoulder, his eyes shining with a mixture of exhaustion and pure, unadulterated joy. "We did it, man," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We actually did it. From that stupid garage to this. Passive income, here we come." We stood there for a long time, not saying anything, just drinking in the moment. The city below us wasn't just a collection of buildings anymore, it was ours. We had built something from nothing, a testament to our friendship, our shared sacrifice. In that moment, I felt a sense of loyalty and love for him that was absolute. He was my brother, my partner, the co-author of my life story. I had no idea he was already holding the pen, getting ready to write me out of it completely. The arrival of the investors changed the temperature of our world. The comfortable, chaotic warmth of the garage was replaced by the cold, air-conditioned chill of glass-walled boardrooms. Our worn-out jeans and hoodies were swapped for tailored shirts and an uncomfortable awareness of our own scuffed shoes. I hated it. I was a builder, comfortable in the binary world of code where problems had logical solutions. This new world was one of nuance, of legal jargon and subtle power plays, but he thrived in it. He seemed born for it. He handled the meetings with a newfound charisma and a fluency in financial terms that amazed me. He spoke of equity dilution, liquidation preferences, and stock options with the confidence of a seasoned veteran. I was more than happy to let him take the lead. My place was with the product, refining the engine that had gotten us here. We divided the labor along our natural lines of strength. I would perfect the creation, and he would sell it to the world. I trusted him. That trust was the bedrock of our entire history, the operating system on which our friendship ran. It was absolute and unquestioning. Looking back, the red flags were not just visible, they were practically waving in my face. There were the late-night phone calls he would take out in the hallway, his voice dropping to a murmur. There were documents he'd have me sign, explaining them as just standard legal stuff for the new corporate structure, sliding them across the table with a casualness that was designed to disarm. I, in my blind faith, would sign without reading the fine print. I was too busy managing our new team of engineers, scaling the platform, doing the work that I thought mattered. He started talking about the need to protect our intellectual property. He suggested we create a new holding company in a different state, a more favorable business environment, he called it. He explained it was a smart risk management strategy, a way to insulate our core assets. He said it would streamline everything, making future investments cleaner. It all sounded so logical, so professional. He was the business mind, after all. I was just the coder. I was so focused on building our future that I failed to see he was building a separate one for himself. The betrayal wasn't a single, dramatic gunshot. It was a slow, methodical poisoning, a series of 1,000 small, legal cuts that I never felt. The final act was executed with a chilling, surgical precision. I came into our new, sleek office one Monday morning to find my key card didn't work. I thought it was a glitch. I called him, but it went straight to voicemail. A cold knot of dread began to form in my stomach. When I was finally let in by a security guard who looked at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion, I found my office had been cleared out. My laptop, my notebooks, my personal photos, everything was gone. In their place, on the center of my empty desk, was a single envelope. Inside was a letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. The language was dense and impenetrable, but the message was brutally clear. The original company, the one we had started in his parents' garage, the one that legally bore most of my personal financial liability, had been stripped of all its assets. The source code, the patents, the user data, the brand itself, everything of value had been legally transferred to the new holding company. A company of which I was not a shareholder, a company I had never even heard of. He had left the original corporate shell, the one tied to my name and my credit, with all of the startup's accumulated debt, the supplier contracts, and the short-term loans we had taken out to bridge the gap before the investment closed. He had taken the kingdom and left me with the ruins. I finally got him on the phone that afternoon. His voice was calm, distant, as if he were talking to a stranger about a minor business transaction. I screamed, I swore, I begged for an explanation. "It's just business," he said, and the simplicity of that phrase broke something inside me. "The investors wanted a cleaner structure. Your risk profile was too high." He tried to frame it as a favor, a way of protecting me from the pressures of the next stage of growth. He said he had structured a small severance for me, a pittance that was a fraction of what my half of the company was now worth. Every word was a lie, a carefully constructed narrative to justify the greatest theft of my life. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was a long con, a meticulously planned heist where the target was not just my company, but my entire life. The last thing he said to me before he hung up was, "Don't take it personally." But it was all personal. It was the late nights, the shared pizzas, the promises made in a dusty garage. It was the trust of a lifetime, liquidated and transferred to a new account under his name only. I sat in my car in the parking garage of the building that should have been our monument to success, holding a meaningless key card and a letter that was my life's death certificate. The company was gone. My savings were gone, but that wasn't the worst of it. The person I had considered my brother had just looked me in the eye and told me I had never really existed. The collapse was not a slow crumble, it was a detonation. One day I was the co-founder of a multi-million-dollar company, and the next I was a man with a negative net worth so vast it felt like a joke. The calls started immediately. The suppliers we owed money to, the landlord for the new office, the bank that held the line of credit I had personally guaranteed with my apartment. My name was on everything. His, I would soon learn, was on nothing of consequence. He had used my trust as his shield. I was the signatory, the guarantor, the fall guy. The world I knew, the one buzzing with potential and the promise of a bright future, was replaced by a monotonous, terrifying loop of angry voicemails and letters filled with threatening legal jargon. My savings were wiped out in a matter of days, covering the most immediate debts. My apartment was next. The foreclosure notice felt less like a legal document and more like a final, cruel punchline. I had 30 days to vacate the home I had bought with the first real money I had ever made. The dream wasn't just dead, its ghost was being evicted. But the financial ruin was a dull, throbbing pain compared to the sharp, searing agony of the betrayal. It infected everything. I would lie awake at night, my mind a relentless projector, replaying every conversation, every handshake, every shared laugh, searching for the moment the lie began. Had it always been there? Was our entire friendship a long-form business strategy on his part? The questions hollowed me out, leaving a cynical, paranoid shell of the man I used to be. I started to see suspicion in every friendly face, a potential angle in every kind word. My faith in humanity, which had once been a boundless resource, was gone. My girlfriend tried to hold on. For weeks, she was my rock, my only connection to a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. She made me food I wouldn't eat, listened to my obsessive, circular rants, and held me when I would break down in the middle of the night. But my depression was a toxic fog, thick and suffocating. It filled every corner of our small world. The optimistic, driven man she had fallen in love with was gone, replaced by a bitter, haunted stranger who couldn't see past his own pain. The light in her eyes began to dim. She couldn't live in the darkness with me anymore. Our breakup was a quiet, heartbreaking surrender. "I don't know who you are anymore," she said, tears streaming down her face. "And I don't think you do either." She was right, I was no one. The co-founder, the boyfriend, the friend, all of those identities had been stolen from me. When she left, the silence she left behind was absolute. My world was now completely empty. I moved into a grim, weekly-rate motel room on the industrial edge of town. The kind of place with peeling wallpaper and a lingering smell of stale cigarettes and despair. I sold my car, my watch, anything of value, just to keep a roof over my head. My days had no structure. I would sleep until the afternoon, the curtains drawn tight against a world I no longer wanted to be a part of. My only connection to my old life was my phone, which I morbidly used to torture myself. I would see articles about him, the boy genius, the visionary CEO. He was on the cover of a business magazine, standing in our old office, smiling a smile I now recognized as predatory. He talked about his journey, the long nights in the garage, the sacrifices he had made. He had completely and utterly erased me from our history. I wasn't just robbed, I was redacted. The shame was a physical barrier that kept me from reaching out to my family or my old friends. How could I explain the magnitude of my failure? How could I admit that I had been so stupid, so blind, so trusting? So I let the relationships wither. I became a ghost in my own life, haunting the fringes of a society I used to believe I was destined to conquer. I hit my lowest point on a rainy Tuesday night. My money was almost gone. I hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days. I was lying on the lumpy motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, feeling the full, crushing weight of my isolation. The betrayal wasn't a wound anymore, it was my entire anatomy. I thought about ending it. The idea came not with a sense of drama or fear, but with a feeling of quiet, logical relief. It was a solution, a way to stop the pain. As I lay there, lost in that bleak calculus, there was a knock at the door. I ignored it. It came again, more insistent this time. I dragged myself off the bed, angry at the intrusion. I opened the door to find a woman, the motel's manager, a tired-looking grandmother with kind eyes. She was holding a small plate covered in foil. "I made too much stew for dinner," she said, not quite meeting my eye. "Thought you might be hungry." She pushed the plate into my hands and walked away before I could say anything. I stood in the doorway, holding the warm plate, and I broke. I slid down to the floor and sobbed, not with despair, but with something else. It was a tiny, flickering light in the suffocating darkness. A simple, unasked-for act of kindness from a complete stranger. It wasn't a solution. It didn't fix my debt or heal my broken heart, but it was a connection. A reminder that there was still some good in the world, even if I couldn't see it. And for the first time in a very long time, I wanted to see the next day. The climb back didn't start with a grand epiphany, but with that plate of beef stew. Eating it was a conscious decision to choose life, to participate in the world again, even in the smallest way. The next day, I took a walk. The day after that, I filled out a job application. It wasn't a comeback, it was a crawl. I got a job at a massive distribution warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The work was grueling and anonymous. I was a number on a spreadsheet, scanning boxes under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights for 10 hours a day. My coworkers were men and women from all walks of life, none of whom knew or cared about the world of venture capital or software startups. They cared about making it to the next paycheck, about their kids, about the local sports team. My previous life as a tech co-founder felt like a bizarre dream. Here, the only code that mattered was a barcode, and the only metric of success was the number of packages you could process in an hour. But the job saved me. The physical exhaustion left no room for the obsessive, looping thoughts of betrayal. The simplicity of the task, pick up a box, scan it, put it on a belt, was a balm to my overstimulated, traumatized mind. It grounded me in the tangible world. I was earning a paycheck, small as it was. It was honest money earned through the sweat of my own brow. I used it to move out of the motel and into a small room I rented in a shared house. It wasn't much, but it was a home. After months of silence, I made the hardest phone call of my life. I called my parents. I stumbled through the story, the shame thick in my throat. I didn't get judgment or disappointment. I got my dad's quiet, steady voice saying, "It's okay, son, come over for dinner on Sunday." Sitting at their dinner table, eating my mom's cooking, I felt a sense of belonging I thought I had lost forever. I began to reconnect with the people I had pushed away. I met an old college friend for a beer. He listened to the whole sordid story, and when I was done, he just nodded and said, "That guy was always an ass." It was the first time I had laughed in what felt like years. I was slowly rebuilding my personal infrastructure, my human support system. I learned to trust again, not with the blind, naive faith of my youth, but with a cautious, earned respect. I realized that my former best friend hadn't broken the world. He had only broken my illusion of it. The world itself was still filled with decent, kind people. My anger towards him began to fade, not because I forgave him, but because I realized the anger was a cage I had built for myself. He was living his life, successful and celebrated, completely unburdened by what he had done. My bitterness was only poisoning me. Letting it go was an act of self-preservation. I started coding again, late at night in my small room after my long shifts at the warehouse. Not for a company, not for an investment, but for me. I built a small, simple application to help community gardens organize their planting schedules. It was a project with no path to monetization, no potential for $1 billion valuation. Its only purpose was to be useful. I gave it away for free. The act of creating something and giving it away with no expectation of reward was incredibly healing. It reconnected me with the pure, joyful act of building that had drawn me to programming in the first place. I don't know what my future holds. I will likely never be a millionaire. I still have debts to pay. I live a simple life, a world away from the one I once thought I was destined for. But my life is my own again. My self-worth is no longer tied to the fluctuating value of a company or the approval of investors. It's found in my work, in my relationships, in the quiet satisfaction of a problem solved or a person helped. A few weeks ago, I was helping my landlord's son with his computer science homework. As I explained a piece of code to him, I saw the moment the concept clicked in his head, the spark of understanding in his eyes. In that small, quiet moment, I felt a sense of wealth and purpose that my stolen millions could never have bought. I am no longer the ghost of my own past. I am the architect of a much smaller, much stronger, and infinitely more valuable future. Thanks for listening to this story. Now I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let's see how global our community is. Comment your country down below. Share this story to your friends and leave a like and subscribe for more episodes like this.